Welcome to a video on all the federal securities acts we need to know for the Series 65 exam. I'll put it up here and give a short definition and way to remember it. Let's get into it. So the first one we need to know is the Securities Act of 1933. And so what this act does is regulate initial public offerings of stock. And so it requires registration, and there are rules that you need to comply with. And so how I like to remember this one is it regulates initial public offerings, so the first offerings of stock to the public. And this is our first act that we need to know. So it's a good way to be like, all right, both kind of similar, and all right, it's the first time people are going to get stock for the company, like the public. The second one we need to know is the Securities Exchange Act of 1934. All right, and the way I like to remember this one is that the Securities Exchange Act of 1934 regulates the next time the securities are sold, so on the second market. So trades, exchanges, like on the New York Stock Exchange, after the IPO, then people of course like to trade their stock a lot, so this regulates like the secondary market, the second time that stock is traded. So how you can remember this is it's a year after 1933, and if you're studying for the 65, you're probably, most of you probably have gotten to this because this is kind of the last section. So for tax purposes, if you hold your stock longer than a year, then it's taxed, you get better tax rate, like long-term rather than short-term gains. So a year after, people are probably not going to sell their stock in under a year for tax purposes. I mean, some people like to even day trade, but normally if you're wanting to invest in something and have like a high return, you're probably going to hold it over a year. So over a year for the next time the securities are sold. All right, our next one is the Investment Advisors Act of 1940, and we also have the Investment Companies Act of 1940. Okay, so both of these acts are to regulate and kind of oversee two different groups. The first one is for investment advisors, so making sure that they are registered properly, comply with certain laws in this act. And then the Investment Company Act is basically for actually not so much companies, like it's more like funds like ETFs or investment companies, like it's for investment companies too, but since on your studying, you know, like an investment advisor can be an actual company, it doesn't have to be like natural persons. The Investment Company Act is more like mutual funds and ETFs. And so how I like to remember this one is these came in 1940, and they're kind of like overseen acts. And so usually, why do they create laws to oversee stuff? Like I just saw something last night when I was on a walk with my husband in the park, and it said, "Do not swim in the pond," and we were like, "Oh yeah," like I don't know, something that I like to think about is like, oh, every rule was made for a reason. So someone swam in that pond. So the Investment Advisors Act, it's regulating advisors because people are worried about something, that advisors are going to be maybe fraudulent. And since it's created in 1940, the worry was probably very high coming off the Great Depression. So you can remember that, like right at the tail end of the Great Depression, they needed to make like laws to prevent fraud and make sure people are complying because that worry was high. So yeah. All right, the next one is a little bit of a mouthful. SEC release, and this just basically is when the SEC like puts out a new law or act. IA, so investment advisor. And then I don't really have a way to remember 1092, you kind of just have to remember the number. But if you have a way, let me know. But basically, what this act does is clarify who is considered an investment advisor under the 1940 Act. So you might be thinking as I did, like, all right, who is actually an investment advisor? Who's an investment advisor representative? Who actually has to follow this? So I remember this because there was probably like a lot of debate, like, oh, I didn't break the rules, like I'm not technically an investment advisor, I'm a broker dealer or something like that. So this law was made, I think in like 1987, 1980s, we don't need to know the date, I don't think, to say, all right, who actually needs to comply to these federal laws for investment advisors, or can you register with the state, or, you know, blah, blah, blah. You can't get away with this because we have this new release. All right. The next one is also a little bit of a mouthful, but you can remember it through the letters. So we have the National Securities Market Improvement Act. Yeah. All right, and so this was in 1996, which is good to know, but it will probably just be referred to as the NSMIA. And so this basically split federal versus state authority. So it was saying like big firms register with the SEC and then not the states. So there's a whole nother set of acts for like the states, but this is just for federal securities, meaning like nationwide. And so states' laws are more for like smaller firms, and you can remember this in the name because it's like national, so it's like nationwide, of course. Securities markets, so like kind of investment advisors and securities being traded on the market. I don't know, that part, you got it. Self-explanatory. Improvement Act, basically, I like to remember it because it's like, since it's kind of split the federal jurisdiction with the state jurisdiction, they were able to improve it more, Improvement Act, because if you have like, if you're trying to manage everyone like at the federal and the state level, like it's going to be a lot harder, but if you have it kind of divided, then there can be more specific rules, people delegated for specific things, and like less people to manage because it's divided up. So like a teacher in a class, I'd assume if you have 100 kids versus like 10, the 10 would probably be a little easier to teach because you have that connection and smaller size. But yeah, the last one we need to know is the Dodd-Frank Act, and this was named after two people, I believe. Dodd-Frank Act. And 2010. We also don't need to know the date for this one. It's not in the title. It's just, it's good to know though that it was made in 2010, right after the stock market crash of 2008. So as you can see, a lot of these acts are coming from problems. A lot of rules come from problems. But basically what this did was increased oversight of advisors, banks, and tried to like help consumer confidence go up. So this act, right after the stock market crash, was created to regulate and help people be like, all right, even though we already have all these rules, we have this one too, which has more specifics in it. So yeah, these are, I'll hop out so you can take a screenshot if you need. These are the federal acts we need to know. Good luck studying.